Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is KDK, Kieldyken, and in today's video I just wanted to go ahead and introduce you guys to the brand new Raspberry Pi 4 Model B 8GB of RAM version. Now before we really get started into this video, I want to clarify some things for you guys and let you guys know what's going on in the retro gaming community. I understand there's a lot of concerns and talks about individuals believing that the Pi 4 8GB model won't do much for emulation for you. And apparently, to be honest with you, that is far from the truth. Because this operating system, or the operating system that will come included with the Raspberry Pi 4 8GB of RAM edition, and it is operating out of a 64-bit operating system, you will have access and be able to tap into OpenGL and Vulkan drivers. Now, at the time that I'm recording this video, I do not know if the Vulkan drivers are currently available for the Raspbian OS. I do know that Supreme OS has OpenGL drivers, which are available, Mesa drivers, but there are additional benefits of running from a 64-bit OS compared to a 32-bit OS. Additionally, every time that you guys right now as gamers have used Emulation Station, you haven't been able to fully use the full advantage of the Pi 4 because it is a huge bottleneck. That's the reason why Dolphin and other emulators will not run on Emulation Station. You have to go to the Pixel desktop in order to activate it. I'll cover all that in a new video, but I just wanted to speak on that for a few moments because people are either wondering if this Pi is going to give them additional performances compared to the previous Pi 4 version and whatnot. Again, you are using the same core, you are still using the same processor and everything. There really won't be much performance there, but because of the 64-bit operating system and the ability to use those OpenGL drivers, it will make a world of a difference. Please reference my other video that I did with Supreme Pro. I did mention that I was able to run Sega Saturn games from the Pixel desktop. I think I was running more at about maybe 60 or 70% better than I was running it on the Emulation Station front end. Now you are looking at all the Model Bs and all of the Raspberry Pi 4 models that have come out since the initial release. On the far left, we have the original version. Actually, this is the upgraded version, which has the USB-C fix. The one here in front of you also is the USB-C fix. This is the model 8GB of RAM version. The one here is the original Pi 4 4GB model. This one does not have the USB-C fix. And then for just kicks and giggles, I wanted to introduce you guys to the Raspberry Pi 4, the one that is saltwater proof. Of course, I still need to edit that video. All right, so what do we have here? So with the new 8GB of RAM Pi 4 Model B, you guys get all the features you guys get included with the regular Pi 4. You also get the USB-C fix. You have two USB 3.0s and two USB 2.0 ports. You get the same HDMI outputs on the board itself. You also have more 8GB. If you actually get the 8GB of RAM here in the middle of the screen, you actually have it right there. It is also capable with the previous models as well as this one, 4K 60 frames per second. I was not able to achieve that with any of the other 64-bit versions. I've only been able to do 1080p, the 1080p fluidly without any problems. And of course, in order for me to do that and prove that, you cannot run it through a capture card. I had to run it directly into a TV, or else it caused hiccups. Also promising OpenGL ES 3.0 graphics with the future capability of running Mesa Vulkan drivers as well. You get your micro SD card as well. And of course, you get your standard 5-volt DC power connection there at the side of the screen here. So all in all, this is a great device. Hopefully the temps are a lot lower than normal. I know when the Raspberry Pi 4 first came out, it was, I think, 85 degrees Celsius. And then after we messed around with it and other guys in the community and you know, started coding and stuff, they started using something called Raspbian Buster Lite. And they got the temps down to about 40 degrees Celsius, something like that. And again, you guys don't have to overclock this if you are using it for retro gaming. However, now if you guys do want to use the Raspberry Pi 4 exclusively as a desktop, you can with this. I do expect it to run a lot cooler than it did before. And then also it will have enough memory on there to open up additional screens there, testing it in a 64-bit operating system. But I was impressed. It was the first time I did get a chance to see the windows open up, you can actually stream a video in YouTube and get 1080p full screen with no hiccups. But we'll see, because I have not tried the new Raspbian Buster operating system yet. So the Raspbian OS, I'm sorry. Haven't tried that yet, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at that tonight. Also, you will need a 2.5 amp power adapter. I do recommend getting the one that the Raspberry Pi Foundation put out, but remember, this has the USB-C fix. This is one of the closest indications you guys can see there. That little notch on the back, as far as it having that. There's also some other features on here too, as far as what they changed on the board. As you guys can see, this is the regular Pi 4 USB-C fix. All the buttons, or I'm sorry, all the resistors are in the same place there at the side. Normally there's a resistor here at the bottom. So I'll go ahead and hold up. Let me go ahead and get this other model so you guys can take a look. And as you can see, this is the original Pi 4 version that came out. That resistor is down here at the bottom. It's not there at the top, just for comparison purposes. So all in all, I do expect this to be a great board, and we are going to do a test tonight. I'm going to give it a standard test. I'm going to run a few videos on here just to see how it compares, and we're going to look at the temps and everything, and then we're going to have a little bit of a little showdown we got planned for you guys tonight. So let's stick around and let's go ahead and find out and see what happens. So before we get started, we will need to download the brand new Raspbian OS system or front end for the Raspberry Pi 4 8GB version. Just to let you guys know, when I approach my reviews for the first time, a lot of times I do things cold turkey, which means I try to look at it from the average consumer perspective. So if you go here to your download section, and you will find a list of downloads. You have Raspberry Pi Pi Imager for Windows, Pi Imager for Mac OS, and then of course you'll have a list of operating systems here that you guys can download. We have the Raspberry Pi OS, and then you also have Noobs. But once you click on this, you'll notice the only ones they have available are the 32-bit operating systems. So I was a little confused looking for the Pi OS, the 64-bit OS. I ended up downloading Noobs thinking I could probably extract it on the card, but that was not possible. But come to find out, it was actually somewhere else in another directory. Even though it is in a beta stage, it was somewhere here in the forum. So that was kind of confusing, threw me for a little loop. Reason being is because if they are going to release a hardware for a new consumer or new type of device, you would think that this would be somewhere in the download section, but obviously it was over here. Now, of course, I do know that this is in a beta stage, but I mean, personally, if this operating system isn't really up to par or out of the beta stage, so to speak, I mean, personally, I think they could have waited another few more months to make sure all the things were tweaked out while they released the hardware and stuff. But it was just kind of frustrating to having to go find it here. I actually had to ask a friend of mine for the link, or where the hell do I find it, because I couldn't find it here in the download section. I mean, that's just where I thought it should have been. As a user, I mean, obviously you're looking for a download, but it was actually over here in the forum. So you want to go here, make sure you guys download it, and then you guys can use your WinDisk32 to extract it to your disk, and then you guys will be up and running. So let's go ahead and get started, and we'll do a little stress test on the SBC and see how it runs for us. Now that we have our software installed, I'm going to run a few tests on here, first of which being the Chromium test. I'm going to play a few videos just to see how it handles, and then check the temperatures on there and see what we end up with. And once we get to the next screen, we're going to go ahead and set up our password. I'm going to go ahead and type in my password now. Oh, that's fine for now. Black border is okay. Go ahead and update the software while we're here. So once the update completes, it takes about 10 minutes for it to install. It'll say setup complete. Do you want to restart your Raspberry Pi in order for the new settings to take effect? And for the purpose of this video, I'm going to go ahead and hit restart so we can get the new settings to take effect on the Pi. Alright, so once we're back in the new Pi 4 8GB model, let's take a look around for a little bit. We have programming, and it has Genie and some another program called Python. We have our internet, which gives us a Chromium browser. And we have our sound and video, which is a VLC media player. That's pretty good with codecs. We have our graphics. We have accessories. We have some other things in here as well. We have terminal, which we'll definitely need to take advantage of. We're here in terminal. We're going to monitor our heat temps and everything else that we can monitor. So I'll leave that there to the side for the bit. And let's see what else we have here in preferences. We have our screen configuration. Not going to mess with that. Recommended software, Raspberry Pi, menu editor, and we have some other things there in the program. So let's play around with this, see what we can get going. I'm going to access the internet, run a few videos, and just play around with this too, just to see what happens and what my specs tell me. Oh wow, the web's moving pretty fast, pretty decent. It's a nice rate of speed there. Let's go to YouTube. I'm going to pull up one of my videos. I want to see how it handles the resolution and then also the frame rates. And this was a high impact video I recorded a couple of years ago, so I want to see how it performs. Right now it's at 480, so let's bump it up. You know, let's see if it can handle 4K. If it can handle 4K, I would be impressed, because all the 64-bit operating systems I have played with so far cannot handle it. And let me pull up stats for nerds. Okay. I'm just going to give it a little bit. I know sometimes it takes a while for it to kind of adjust, so we'll give it a minute. See if there's any performance increases here. But first, you know what? Maybe I should. Okay. Alright, so this is playing 4K. It's bad. So let's drop it down just for a second. I see it stuttering. Let's drop it down to 1440 and see what happens. And then make it full screen, see if that gives me anything at all. Now, in fairness, the other operating systems I've used on the front end, they've all had a problem playing 4K on the Pis. So this is actually, it's not too bad, honestly. The Pi has never really had the opportunity to really play 4K. I have played 1080p full screen with no issues, but not 4K or 1440, which would be 2K. But usually after a while, after a few seconds or a couple of minutes. All right, I'm gonna drop this down to 1080p and see what happens. Now it should play fluidly here. If it doesn't, then something's up. Alright, and it still shows I'm dropping frames, just not as much. You guys can see the stats up there at the top. And I'm gonna fast forward this video a little bit. There we go. I wanted to see if the frames would still drop at 1080p full screen. I'm going to drop this down here in a second, but All right. So overall, it is performing better than it did on the 32-bit OS. Remember, this is a beta. They are still working on some things, but considering it is in beta, this is running really good. I've never had this type of performance on any Pi version, even when the Pi 4 first came out, the 4GB model. You still couldn't get this type of performance. I mean, you could barely get 720p, and then definitely you couldn't get full screen on it as well. So, yeah, it's definitely running. It's a little, you know, it stutters a little bit now and then. So let me go ahead and minimize this a little bit, and we should be able to get full screen here, no issues. Find the button to there we go. All right, guys, now that you guys have seen a little bit of the Raspbian OS, we're going to do a little bit of a comparison test. So obviously here on the right, I'm using a Samsung 65-inch 1080p TV. Got this back in 2014. It is 3D capable and everything, and it has a great dynamic display. This is going to host the Raspbian OS 64-bit operating system. And over here to my left is Supreme OS 64-bit operating system. This is on a Samsung 4K TV. I don't remember all the specs on this operating system, and to be honest with you, I don't remember if this one is better than the one that is on Supreme Pro, but I thought it would be a good idea to do a comparison video to see how this 64-bit operating system would compare in a video test to Raspbian OS. Now, in all fairness, I will let you guys know that I do have to type in a script in order to use the other 8GB model, so I am using my Pi 4 4GB model, which is in a case. I'll explain that a little bit about the temperatures, and then there is the other 8GB right there that has the Raspbian OS on it. So again, as I said, this one doesn't have any fans or any heat sinks, and this one obviously is in a great case. There is the other 8GB right there because I'm currently not using it. So we're going to do a little bit of a comparison test, obviously with a few YouTube videos, so you guys can see exactly how it streams and how it handles. I'm actually pretty impressed with the results. The one thing I will mention though is that the Raspbian OS, they did a great job with the optimization of the system, because currently, get the right mouse here, currently I am running at a steady pace of 50 degrees Celsius. That is really impressive compared to the thermal temps of 80 to 85 degrees Celsius you guys experienced with the Raspberry Pi 4 when it first launched. So that is really impressive. Supreme OS, Supreme Pro, they run at about 44, 45 degrees Celsius. Some cases 55. So it's really on par with the same numbers, so that is really good as well. So I'll just pull that here up for you guys for just a second so you guys can take a look at it for yourself. But all in all, it's really great. So let me show you guys, this is the temps, as you guys can see. As you guys can see, 40 degrees Celsius there, 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and that is under a load. So that's actually pretty good with either one of them. So that's something to be proud of. So let's go ahead and get into this test and let's take a look. All right, so I got both videos set up. We have my Traxxas versus DJI drone video set for both of these. Both of these are also displaying in a 1080p 60 Hz format. This one was originally set up at 4K. So I'm gonna go ahead, play the video, you guys be the judge. I also pulled up the stats for nerds so you guys can see exactly what's going on. But I do believe, however, I do get better optimization on the Supreme Pro version of the desktop with the 64-bit OS. So you guys can check that out if you want. So let's go ahead and get into this and play the video. And one reason why I selected this video in particular is because of all the movement and you can see the blurriness on the screen. So let's begin. All right. I think they're off a little bit. That was at 3 minutes and 25 seconds. And so far on this one, we have a few frames dropped. And over here, we have 0 frames dropped. Interesting, okay. My download speed is 225 megs and my upload speed is about 25. And so far, we are at 54 frames per second drop. So I'm gonna stand back a little bit so you guys can see both of these go. Should have used the GoPro for this. And this was originally shot on my drone at 4K 30 frames per second. Alright, and on this one, Supreme OS, this one we're now at 2 frames dropped at 1080p 60 frames. I'm sorry, at 1080p 30 frames. And this one we're still at 54 and holding. Now it's at 55. And now we're at 6 frames per second. Oh, I'm sorry, not 6 frames per second, but 6 frames dropped. Still holding at 1080p. On Supreme OS, and then back on Raspbian OS, we're still holding at 55 frames. Either way, this is impressive from 2 guys. You guys know the Supreme team with WDG, who worked exclusively on the desktop version, and then of course the Raspbian team. Either way, the Raspberry Pi has never looked this great on any device. So congrats to both development teams for their accomplishments. Now, I'm not sure if I stated this earlier in the video. The reason why I was not using a capture card is because if you do use a capture card, it does interrupt the frames and the performance that you would get on video playback. So that's why I had to record this from my cell phone and can't screen capture. Besides the fact that I can't screen capture 2 desktops at the same time. Alright, so this one here, Raspbian OS, is at 59 frames dropped out of 6,300. And out of 6,300 or 6,200 frames here on the Supreme OS, we have 7 frames dropped. Great job. Alright, so now I'm going to blow up the screen a little bit just to see how it performs. I'm going to rewind it a little bit. Alright, so this is where the action really takes place. I wasn't too surprised that the Supreme OS could handle full screen 1080p, but the real test is actually looking at the screen in 1080p full screen, which has been really impossible for any of the Pis, especially the Pi 4. We did jump up in frames because when you do maximize the screen, it is severely lagging, so it takes a little while to catch up. So what we're looking at right now is its ability to maintain its current frame rate. So right now, Supreme OS, 64-bit OS, is maintaining at least 60 drop frames. It has not moved since then, since I've maximized it. And Raspbian OS is still slowly dropping frames and performance. Right now, as you guys see, it's still moving at 415 frames, dropped out of 10,000. Now, even though the frames are dropping on Raspbian OS, you're still getting a good performance. I mean, you really can't notice it too well. There was a little hiccup here on Supreme OS, but we're still holding at 60 frames per second. I'm sorry, 60 frames dropped. Now I just jumped up to 87. Still not a big deal because currently we are now at 11,000 frames, 11,200, as you guys can see. And over here, out of 11,700 frames, we are now at 457 drop. But again, remember, this is a still beta program. This program over here, Supreme OS, this originally came back out in January. So just so you guys know, you can see exactly where the Supreme team has been since the initial launch of the Pi 4 when it first came out back in June, August of last year, 2019. And this is Raspbian's first attempt at a 64-bit OS that is still in beta. So just so you guys know that for historical references. I'm gonna stand back a little bit so you guys can see both of them. See if I can get all this in frame. All right, we're at 95 frames dropped now on Supreme OS, and we're at 458 frames dropped. Both of them are about 13,000, so they're off at about how many frames as far as 200 frames total. So Raspbian OS right now is at 13,800 and something frames, and the Supreme OS is at 13,840 frames and only has 95 frames dropped. Now, I do know the Supreme OS does have the OpenGL Mesa drivers. I'm not familiar with what is currently running on Raspbian OS, so if they don't have any OpenGL drivers running right this second, that's still really good performance for what it's doing. Alright, Supreme OS is currently at 101 frames dropped, and Raspbian OS is at 450 frames dropped. Alright guys, I'm going to go ahead and conclude the test here. I'm going to do one last thing here just to see what will happen. So let me go ahead and we're going to bump this up to 4K. I'll go ahead and do full screen for the heck of it. Let's see how it handles. Alright, so we have both operating systems and front ends running full screen at 4K. Let's take a look at how many frames are dropping. So currently Supreme OS has 8 drop frames out of 443, and right now Raspbian OS has 600 frames dropped out of 1275. So this is some remarkable stuff. Each one is running at 1080p, 60 hertz, evenly displayed. Remember, this one has more memory, but it's not being fully optimized and used right now. And this one only has 4 gigabytes of memory, but it has OpenGL Mesa drivers on there. So you guys can see the difference in how Mesa drivers really affects performance of everything. So again, I'm not sure if any drivers or video drivers are running on this right now for Raspbian OS. I'll have to check that at a later date. But as you guys can see, currently right now we are at 852 frames dropped with the Raspbian OS. And over here we have 1621 frames dropped. So again, you guys ask questions as far as saying, oh, well, it's not going to affect retro gaming. I can promise you those drivers, even on this lower end device, as far as memory, is going to affect it. Now, I know there's more optimization that could be done on this OS, so just think of what the advantages that you guys will be able to take or use once Emulation Station is fully optimized on a 64-bit OS. So I have a lot of good hope for this. 37 full screen for 4K, and over here we're at full screen 4K, 1200 frames drop, 1224. All right, guys, make sure you guys hit that notification bell, and make sure you guys also subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to, please just leave a comment below or whatnot. But the reason why I want you to do that is because I am going to play some retro games on the Pi 4 8GB version. I do have a update that allows me to play RetroPie on this board. You guys won't see too many videos of those because there's not a lot of codes out there, but I do have an update for it that will allow me to play retro games through RetroPie on the 64-bit OS. So catch you guys next time. Hope you guys enjoyed this review, and I will catch you later. Have a good night.